The people with real money will almost never tell you how they got it. Not because there's a secret society, not because they signed something. It's simpler and stranger than that. The truth about money, said plainly at a dinner table in a normal voice, sounds like an insult to every person in the room who is still working for a living. So they don't say it, they smile. They credit hard work. They thank their team, they mention luck, they praise their parents, and they change the subject to the wine. And you drive home with the polite version in your head. The polite version is the thing keeping you poor. I spent about 30 years on the other side of that silence. I built companies. I sold some of them. I put money into other people's companies, and I watched very closely what actually happened to the money and who ended up with it. And at some point, I crossed a line where I no longer needed anything from anyone. No job, no client, no favor, no room's approval. That is the only condition under which a man will tell you the truth about this, because the truth is expensive to say and he has to be able to afford the cost. I can afford it now. So here it is. Without the manners, you are not paid for your time. You never were. Not really. And the day you understand what you are actually being paid for is the day this entire game either opens up in front of you or the day you realize you've been losing it quietly for 20 years because nobody ever told you the rules were different from the ones written on the wall. Stay with me. This is going to take the better part of an hour, and it's going to contradict almost everything you were raised to believe about work, about saving, about being responsible. Good. The people who told you those things are not rich. Ask yourself why you took financial advice from them in the first place. Let me tell you what this costs you, because I don't want you to think of it as money. Money is the least interesting thing in this conversation. Money you can lose and earn again, lose again, earn again. It's replaceable. The cost is time. And time is the one account you cannot refill. A working life is roughly 80,000 hours. 40 years, give or take, of showing up. That is the raw material you were handed. Not money, not talent, hours. And the default plan, the one almost everyone is on, is to take those 80,000 hours and sell them one at a time for a wage. Trade the one resource you can never manufacture more of for the one resource that can be printed by men in a building at will in unlimited quantity. Sit with the asymmetry of that trade. You are exchanging something finite and non-renewable for something infinite and renewable, and you were taught to feel responsible for doing it. You were taught to call it a good job. And here's the part that should frighten you a little. The trade compounds against you. Every decade you spend renting your time is a decade you did not spend building something that earns without you. The person who owns and the person who rents can start at the exact same place, same intelligence, same energy, same town, and 30 years later, they live on different planets. Not because one worked harder. Often the renter worked harder because one of them understood a rule the other was never told. There's a line on the thumbnail that brought you here. Break the rule before 40 or work forever. I meant that literally, and I'll earn it before we're done. There's a window. It closes. Not because you become incapable, but because the machinery of a normal life, the mortgage, the fear, the exhaustion, the reasonable people around you gets heavier every year, and the leap gets harder to make. The best time was earlier. The second best time is the hour you're in right now. Everything I'm about to explain to you, I also wrote down. Slowly, properly. The way something like this should actually be studied, not skimmed. It became 3 volumes, a written system, not a book of tips. The link is in the description, first one, but don't go yet. You need the next 40 minutes first because the system won't make sense to you until you understand the ground it's built on. Watch this, then read that, in that order. Stay with me. Here's the first rule, and it's the one they say the least because it's the one that would end the conversation. You will not get rich renting out your time. There's a man named Naval Ravikant who put it about as cleanly as it can be. You're never going to get wealthy renting out your hours because your hours are capped and your rates are capped and there's a ceiling built into the whole arrangement. He's right. But I want to do something he doesn't have to do in a single sentence. I want to show you why it's true from the ground up so that it becomes yours and not just a thing you heard. Why is it true? Go back to the beginning. Go back before money, before jobs, before any of it. For almost the entire span of human existence, we were hunter-gatherers in small bands on the savannah. And in that world, effort and reward were welded together. You walked, you tracked, you threw the spear, and if you were good and lucky, you ate that night. There was no gap between the work and the payoff. The man who hunted got the meat. There was no way to hunt on Tuesday and get fed for the next 40 years. The arrangement was fair, and it was fair because it was direct. Your body, your effort, your food, all in the same afternoon. That world is written into you. Deep in your nervous system is the assumption that this is how reward works. You put in the hours, you get the food, and if you want more food, you put in more hours. That instinct is ancient and it's honest, and in the world you actually live in, it is a trap. Because somewhere in the last several thousand years, we invented a thing that broke the weld. We invented the ability to store effort, to capture it, hold it, and have it work for you while you sleep. The farmer who cleared a field wasn't just feeding himself that year, he'd built something that produced every year after. The man who owned the mill didn't grind the grain. The grinding happened, he owned the happening. And slowly, quietly, the world split into two kinds of people. People who trade effort by the hour, and people who own things that produce effort on their behalf. The rich are not the people who work the hardest. I want to be very precise about this, because it's the exact spot where you were lied to. The rich are the people who figured out how to be paid for something other than their hours. And once you're paid for something other than your hours, the ceiling disappears. Because there are only 24 hours in a day. And there is no limit at all on how many times the thing you built can be used. Let me put it as plainly as I know how. If you get paid only when you show up, you have a job, no matter what it pays you. A surgeon earning a fortune per operation still only has 2 hands and 1 calendar. When he stops cutting, the money stops. That is a very expensive job. It's still a job. And a job, this is the definition I want you to carry. A job is any arrangement where your income stops the moment you do. So the first rule isn't quit your job. That's what people hear, and it's stupid, and it gets them into trouble. The first rule is understand what you're actually selling and start on the side quietly to build the other thing. The thing that pays whether or not you show up. We'll talk about what that thing is. But it starts with seeing the trade clearly. You are not paid for your time. You're paid for the value you deliver, and time is just the crudest, lowest leverage way there is to deliver it. Second rule, and this one requires me to tighten 3 words you use every day and have probably never actually separated. Wealth, money, status. Most people treat these as the same thing wearing different clothes. They are not. Confusing them is why people chase the wrong one their whole lives and end up bitter. Let me define them. Wealth is assets that earn while you sleep. Businesses that run without you. Ownership in things that produce a piece of software that serves people at 3 in the morning while you're unconscious. That is wealth. It's not the money, it's the machine that makes the money. Money is how we move wealth around. It's a claim, a certificate that says other people owe you some of their time and effort, redeemable later, wherever you like. Money is useful, but money is not the goal. Money in a mattress is dead. Money is the freight, not the cargo. And status is your rank in the human pecking order. Who bows to whom? Who gets the better table? Status is ancient. It's the savannah. Again, the hierarchy of the band. Now here's the distinction that changes how you see everything. Wealth is a positive-sum game. Status is a zero-sum game. Let me unpack that, because those two phrases do a lot of work. Positive sum means the pie can grow. I can get wealthier without you getting poorer, because we can both create things that didn't exist before. When someone builds a company that makes people's lives better, wealth was created out of nothing but insight and effort. Everyone at the table can win. Status is the opposite. Status is a fixed number of seats. For me to rise in the ranking, someone has to fall. There's only one first place, which means status games are, by their nature, wars. Zero sum. And here's the tragedy of it. Most people chasing what they think is money are actually chasing status, the bigger house on the same street, the car that says something to the neighbor. They're not trying to be wealthy. They're trying to win a ranking. And a ranking is a treadmill because the moment you climb one rung, the whole scale resets around you. And now you're comparing yourself to the people one rung up. You never arrive. That's not a flaw in you. It's the design of the game. Naval again said it, as a rule, you could tape to your wall, seek wealth, not money, and never status. I'd add the reason he leaves implicit. Chase status, and you'll spend your life in a war you cannot win against people who don't even know they're fighting you over a prize that evaporates the instant you touch it. So why do the rich stay silent? Here's a piece of the answer, and it connects directly to what we just built. Because talking about how you got wealthy is a status move, and the genuinely wealthy have usually stopped needing to make status moves. The loud ones, the ones shouting about their money, are almost always still playing the status game. They need you to see it. The quiet ones aren't hiding a secret. They just got off the treadmill, and the treadmill is what generates the noise. Silence isn't a strategy. It's a symptom of not needing anything from you. Let me sharpen the promise, because we're now standing at the door of the actual mechanism. Everything so far, don't rent your time. Seeing wealth, not status, is diagnosis. Now the machine. If there's one word the elite genuinely never say out loud, one word that does more than any other, it's this one: leverage. Leverage is the multiplier on your effort. It's how 1 unit of you becomes 10 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 units of output. And the reason this is the whole game is arithmetic. Your effort alone, unleveraged, is capped 1 person, 24 hours. But effort times leverage has no ceiling. 2 people can work equally hard, equally smart, and one earns 1,000 times the other, and the entire difference is leverage. Nothing else. This is the thing. Now, historically, there were only 2 forms of leverage, and both were locked. The first is labor other people working for you. This is the oldest form. The king had subjects, the lord had serfs, the industrialist had workers. Get 1,000 people to work under you, and your effort is multiplied by 1,000. But labor leverage is hard. People are difficult. They need managing. They leave. They have their own lives. And to command labor, you generally had to already have power. It was permissioned. Someone had to let you. The second is capital money working for you. You take money and you deploy it, and it comes back with more money attached. This is more scalable than labor. You can move millions with a keystroke, but capital leverage has an obvious gate. You need capital to begin. And to get others' capital, someone with money has to decide to trust you. Permissioned again, the bank has to say yes. The investor has to say yes. Someone has to let you. For all of history, those were the 2 doors, and both had a guard, which is why wealth stayed concentrated. The people who had leverage could get more, and the people who didn't couldn't get in. And then, in your lifetime, something happened that has no precedent. A third form of leverage appeared, and this one has no guard at the door. Code and media, products that replicate at 0 cost. You write a piece of software once, and it serves 10 people or 10 million with essentially the same effort from you. The machine copies it for free, forever, while you sleep. You record something once, words, a voice, an idea, and it reaches 1 person or 100 million at no additional cost to you. This is a genuinely new thing in human history. Naval's word for it is the one that matters most here. This new leverage is permissionless. Nobody has to pick you. You don't need a bank. You don't need to be born into it. You don't need to command an army of workers. You need a laptop and something worth saying or building. Do you understand what that means? For the entire span of human existence, the multiplier on human effort was held behind a gate, and the gatekeepers were the wealthy. And then, quietly, in the last 20-odd years, the gate came off one of the doors, and almost nobody rearranged their life around it. They kept lining up at the old doors the job, asking permission, renting the hours, while the door with no guard stood wide open beside them. This is the before 40 rule, and now I can say it properly. The permissionless leverage is available to you right now today, regardless of your surname or your bank balance or who your parents knew. But building with it takes a run of years where you can take risk, tolerate uncertainty, put in strange asymmetric effort that pays nothing for a long time and then pays enormously. That that kind of season is far easier to have before the full weight of a life lands on you. Not impossible after, easier before. The leverage doesn't expire. Your appetite for using it quietly does one obligation at a time. That's the whole of it. That's why the timing is real. Think about the printing press for a moment, because we've been here before. Before it, if you wanted to copy a book, a monk wrote it out by hand for the better part of a year. Knowledge was trapped, and whoever controlled the copying controlled the world. The press dropped the cost of copying an idea to almost nothing, and it broke empires. It ended the monopoly on knowledge and the whole order that sat on top of it. The internet is that, again, except it isn't only copying words now. It's copying products, services, businesses, the machinery of wealth itself at zero cost, permissionlessly to anyone who reaches for it. You are alive inside the largest redistribution of leverage in the history of your species, and the redistribution goes to whoever picks it up. Most people won't, right? That's not cynicism, it's just the pattern, the door being open and the line staying at the old one. Let me stop for a breath, because what I just handed you, the 3 forms of leverage, and the fact that the third one has no gatekeeper, that's the single most valuable idea in this entire hour. And I compressed it into about 4 minutes. In the written system, leverage isn't 4 minutes. It's a chapter you live inside for a while, because actually choosing your leverage and restructuring your life around it is not something you absorb from a sentence. What I just sketched takes 40 pages to install in a way that changes what you do on Monday morning. That's what the 3 volumes are, the map you're watching, walked as territory, slowly, in order, first link in the description. Now stay with me, because leverage is a multiplier, and I still have to tell you what to point it at. Leverage on its own is a multiplier, and a multiplier works in both directions. Multiply the wrong thing and you get a bigger version of the wrong thing faster. So the question becomes, leverage applied to what? What do you point it at? This brings us to a phrase that sounds abstract until it clicks, and then you can't unsee it. Specific knowledge. Specific knowledge is the knowledge you have that cannot be trained into someone else. It's the opposite of what school sells. School sells the knowledge that can be taught to anyone, which by definition means anyone can have it, which means it isn't scarce, which means it isn't worth much. If a skill can be reduced to a curriculum and taught to 1,000 people, 1,000 people will have it, and you will compete with all of them, and the price will fall to the floor. That's not a conspiracy. It's just supply. Specific knowledge is the other kind. It's the thing you know that's built from your particular obsessions, your specific wiring, the stuff you learned by playing that felt like play to you and would feel like unbearable work to almost anyone else. Here's the test Naval offers, and it's a good one. Specific knowledge is found by pursuing what genuinely fascinates you, not what's currently in fashion. It feels like play from the inside and looks like work from the outside. The things you did as a kid or a teenager almost effortlessly that you didn't even see as skills because they came so naturally, that's the trailhead. That's where your specific knowledge is hiding, in the things you can't help doing. Why does that matter for money? Because specific knowledge cannot be competed away. Nobody can go to a school and learn to be you. Whatever you build out of your genuine, weird, specific edge sits in a market of one, and a market of one has no price war. Now hold specific knowledge in one hand, leverage in the other. Here's the equation the elite live by and rarely spell out. You take the thing only you can do, your specific knowledge, and you point the world's new permissionless leverage at it. You encode your judgment into a product that copies for free. You broadcast your particular understanding to millions at no marginal cost. That's it. That's the machine. Specific knowledge tells you what to build. Leverage decides how many people it reaches. And the multiplication of the two is what people are looking at when they say someone got lucky. But there's a third ingredient, quieter than the other two, and it's the one that separates the people who capture the value from the people who merely create it. Accountability. Accountability means putting your name on things, taking the real risk of failure, of looking foolish, of being blamed under your own name in public where it counts. Most people spend their whole careers hiding inside an organization precisely so that no single failure can be pinned to them. And that's Understandable, it's safe, but understand the cost of that safety. If no failure can land on you, then no success can either. You've made yourself unblameable, which is the same thing as making yourself uncreditable. The upside and the downside are the same door, and if you nail it shut against the loss, you've nailed it shut against the gain. The man who says out loud, "This is mine, this was my call, judge me by how it turns out," that man is taking accountability, and the market pays enormously for it. Because it's rare, because it's frightening, and because it's the only way anyone knows who's actually responsible for what. There's a thinker named Nassim Taleb who built a whole philosophy around a related idea that you shouldn't fully trust anyone who has no personal stake in the outcome, no exposure to the downside of their own advice. Skin in the game, he calls it. The absence of it is everywhere, and it rots everything it touches. So put your name on your work, carry the downside. That's the price of the upside, and it's a bargain. And there's one capstone here, the highest paid trade of all in the age of leverage, and it's worth naming because it explains why some people with all the same tools pull so far ahead. Judgment. In a world where anyone can copy your product for free and anyone can broadcast to millions, the bottleneck stops being effort, and it stops even being knowledge. Knowledge is on the phone in your pocket. The bottleneck becomes judgment. Knowing which thing to build, which risk to take, which of 1,000 plausible directions is the right one. Leverage is a lever with no conscience. It multiplies whatever you point it at. Point it with bad judgment, and you scale a mistake to the moon, which is why the highest paid people alive are not the hardest working and not even the most knowledgeable. They're the ones with the best judgment applied through the most leverage. And judgment, unlike a credential, cannot be handed to you. It's earned slowly through experience and honest error correction, through making real decisions with real stakes and paying attention to how they actually turn out. Every time you take accountability, put your name on a call, and watch the result, you buy a little more judgment. That's the deeper reason to carry the downside, not just that the market pays for it, but that it's the only way judgment ever gets built. The man protected from all consequences never develops any. He stays a child in the one faculty that matters most, because judgment is the scar tissue of good and bad decisions, and he never once let himself get cut. Let me make this more personal, because we're past the theory now and into the part that actually decides how your life goes. Here's a rule that will sound like heresy, because it contradicts the one piece of financial advice everyone agrees on. You will not save your way to freedom. Cutting your coffee, clipping coupons, denying yourself the small pleasures for 40 years, that is not a wealth strategy. It's a survival strategy dressed up as one, and the difference matters enormously. Let me show you why, with arithmetic again, because arithmetic doesn't lie to protect your feelings. Saving is subtraction. You take what you earn, you remove pieces of it, and you keep the remainder. And there's a hard floor under subtraction. You cannot spend less than nothing. The most disciplined saver on earth can, at absolute best, keep all of a capped income, and a capped income minus even zero is still capped. You cannot subtract your way to a large number. It's mathematically impossible. The ceiling on frugality is your salary, and your salary, as we established an hour ago, has a ceiling of its own. Wealth is not subtraction. Wealth is multiplication. It comes from the uncapped side, from building the thing that earns without you, from the leverage that has no roof. And multiplication and subtraction are not two versions of the same activity. They're different games entirely. The person obsessed with saving is playing defense on a field where all the points are scored on offense. He can play perfect defense for 50 years, and the final score will still be small, because you don't win by not losing in a game that's decided by how much you create. Now, I want to be careful, because this is exactly where people hear what they want to hear. I am not telling you to be reckless with money, living below your means, staying out of debt that isn't building something, keeping a reserve so that fear never forces your hand. That's not frugality as a wealth strategy. That's just not sabotaging yourself. And you should absolutely do it. The reserve matters because desperation is the enemy of judgment. And a person one missed paycheck from ruin cannot take the long horizon risks that compounding requires. So keep the floor. But don't confuse keeping the floor with building the house. Not falling is not the same as climbing. And there's a deeper reason the scrimping life so rarely leads anywhere good, and it goes back to status, and it has a name: hedonic adaptation. Let me define it, because it explains most of human unhappiness around money. Hedonic adaptation is the fact that you return to roughly the same level of contentment no matter what happens to you. The raise, the bigger house, the new car, each one lifts you for a few weeks, and then you adapt, and the new thing becomes the baseline, and you're standing exactly where you started, hungry for the next thing. This is the treadmill again, the status game rendered in dopamine, which means the entire premise of deny yourself now so you can consume more later is built on a lie. The extra consumption later won't make you any happier because you'll adapt to it in a month. You'll have spent 40 years of denial buying a temporary bump you could have gotten from almost anything. So if the goal isn't more stuff, and it isn't, because more stuff doesn't hold, what's left? Freedom. The one thing you don't adapt to. You do not wake up one morning bored of being free, the way you get bored of a car. Autonomy over your own hours, your own work, your own days, that keeps paying forever, because it isn't a possession you habituate to. It's the absence of a cage you'd otherwise feel every single day. This is why the wealthy people who actually seem content are almost never the ones with the most objects. They're the ones with the most control over their own time. They figured out the game was never about accumulating things to consume. It was about buying back their own life. And you cannot buy that back through subtraction. You have to build it. Which brings us to the force that makes all of it work. And it's the one that requires the most patience to hear, because it works against every instinct the modern world has trained into you. Compounding is the most powerful force you have, and it's invisible until it's overwhelming. You know, the arithmetic, a thing that grows on itself, accelerates slowly at first, then absurdly. Everyone nods at this, and almost no one lives by it, because the early part of any compounding curve looks like nothing is happening. For a long, long time, it looks like failure. The line barely lifts off the floor. And that flat, discouraging stretch is exactly where most people quit right before the curve turns up. They mistake the shape of success for the shape of failure, because in the beginning they look identical. But here's what I really want you to understand about compounding, because it's bigger than money. It doesn't only apply to capital. It applies to everything that can build on itself, and the most valuable of those things are not financial. Your reputation compounds. Every time you do what you said you'd do, deliver more than you promised, tell the truth, when it costs you, you add to a reserve that grows on itself. And after enough years, your name alone opens doors that money can't, because people compete to work with you, to fund you, to send you the good opportunities before anyone else sees them. That reserve took a decade of small, honest acts to build, and it cannot be bought at any price. It can only be compounded into existence. Your relationships compound. And this is where I need to give you the single most practical instruction in this entire hour. Play long-term games with long-term people. Say it back to yourself. Long-term games, long-term people. Let me unpack why it's so powerful. Almost all the returns in life, in wealth, in knowledge, in love, in everything that matters, come from compound interest. And compound interest requires that you stay in the game long enough for it to work, and that you stay in it with the same people so that the trust between you compounds too. When you find the small number of people you can build with over decades, partners, collaborators, a handful of genuine friends, you stop starting over. Every year of trust makes the next year more productive. The relationship itself becomes an asset that pays. The person who is always chasing the new deal, the new crowd, the new city, burning the last set of people to get to the next, that person resets their compounding to zero over and over and wonders why nothing ever accumulates. Trust is the substrate everything valuable grows in, and trust only compounds if you stop pulling it out of the ground to check on it. Now, this finally lets me answer the question in the title completely. Why do the rich stay silent? We said part of it is that they've stopped playing the status game. Here's the deeper part. Because envy is real, and it's ancient, and it's dangerous. The savannah, again, in a small band, the one who has visibly more is a threat to everyone else, and the group has an old, instinctive response to that person, and it isn't admiration. The wealthy know this in their bones, even if they can't name it. To announce your wealth is to paint a target on yourself and invite the whole machinery of human envy to come for you. So they go quiet, not to keep a secret from you, to keep themselves safe from the oldest emotion there is. And there's one more layer, the subtlest. Compounding the real engine requires a patience and a long time horizon that the loud crowd doesn't have and will actively mock you out of. If you talk about what you're building, you invite 1,000 opinions from people playing short-term games, and their doubt is contagious and their timeline is measured in weeks. The people who compound learn early to stop explaining themselves to people who won't be there in 10 years. The silence isn't superiority. It's protection of the curve from the noise until the curve is too big to argue with. So let me pull all of it together now, because this is the moment the whole thing locks. Don't rent your time. Seek wealth, not status. Point permissionless leverage at your specific knowledge. Put your name on it. Refuse to save your way to a small life. And let it compound quietly with long-term people for longer than feels reasonable. Every rule we've built stacks into a single machine, and the machine does one thing. It takes a few concentrated years of the right kind of effort and converts them into a lifetime of not having to. But here's the reframe. Here's the thing underneath all of it that the elite understand and never say, because saying it sounds either obvious or insane, depending on whether you felt it. Money is not the goal. Money was never the goal. Money is stored freedom. That's what it actually is. When you strip away the status and the objects and the noise, money is nothing but energy that's been captured and held redeemable later as choice. Every unit of real wealth you build is a unit of future freedom. A morning, you don't have to sell. A room, you don't have to please. A no, you get to say without fear. That's the cargo. Everything else was freight. And the moment you understand that truly, not as a slogan, something strange happens. You stop wanting money for its own sake, and you start wanting it for exactly one thing, so that you never have to think about it again. Here's the paradox. The wealthiest people live inside, and it sounds like a riddle. Until you've crossed it, you play the money game as hard as you can, with everything you have, precisely so that one day you can stop playing it entirely and never look back. The reason to win the game is to be free of the game, not to accumulate a bigger and bigger score, to reach the score that buys your exit, and then to walk out and spend the rest of your life on the things that were the point all along. This is why the rich stay silent at the deepest level. Not because they're guarding a tactic, because the real secret can't be handed to you as a trick. The real secret is a shift in what you're even playing for. The loud people, the ones still shouting about money, are still inside the game, still keeping score, still needing you to see the number. The ones who understood got quiet because they stopped playing to win and started playing to leave. And you cannot explain I'm playing to leave the table to a room full of people who define their entire worth by their seat at it. So you don't try. You quietly build your exit and let them think you got lucky. And now the window makes total sense. Before 40, or work forever, not because you become useless, but because the exit is a machine you have to build, and building it takes a season of risk and strange effort and delayed reward that gets harder to summon with every year that the weight of a normal life settles onto your shoulders. The leverage is lying there, permissionless, free, waiting. What's scarce isn't the opportunity. What's scarce is the version of you that's still willing and able to reach for it before the reasons not to pile up too high to climb. I told you at the start that the truth about money, said plainly, sounds like an insult to everyone still working for a living. Now you've heard it plainly, and maybe some of it stung, and if it did, that's not me being cruel. That's the sound of a rule you were never told finally being said out loud. So let me leave you with one thing to actually do, because an hour of this is worthless if it stays an idea. This week, find the one place in your life where you are renting your time and begin small, quiet, on the side to build the one thing next to it that could pay you without you. Not a resignation, not a leap off a cliff. One asset, one product, one piece of writing, one line of code, one thing with your name on it that could be used more than once. Point your specific edge at the permissionless leverage that's sitting right there on the desk in front of you and start the compounding. Then protect it. Stay in longer than feels reasonable. Do it with people who'll still be there in 10 years. And say almost nothing about it to anyone who won't. That's the whole thing. That's what the quiet ones did. They just started earlier than you, and they didn't explain themselves. If this way of thinking is what you've been missing, if some part of this hour felt less like new information and more like something you already suspected and were never given permission to say, then I'll tell you what to do with that, and then I'll let you go. The full system is written down. All of it. Slowly. In order. The way it should be studied. 3 volumes. The description. First link. Read it if you're the kind of person who's going to build the exit and not just admire the door. Or don't. Take what you heard today, close this, and go start the one asset by the end of the week with nothing more than what I've given you. Both of those are good paths. Both of them are better by a wide margin than the one you were on an hour ago, before anyone told you that you were never being paid for your time. That's all I have for you today. Go build the thing that pays while you sleep, and then get quiet and let it.